Welcome, everyone. Mariana here at Mexico Relocation Guide. Welcome to today's live stream. Today's live stream is all about answering your questions about moving to Mexico. I do have a couple of updates that I'm going to share regarding Mexican residency visas because I know that is probably the number one topic that most people ask us about. Our most frequently asked question is usually regarding residency visas. But then, of course, I'm going to be answering your questions as you guys join this live stream, as you guys post them. But we're going to get started here soon in a minute. Feel free to let me know where you're watching from. I always love seeing your comments and seeing where in the world you're watching us from. It's always really cool to know that we're connecting all across the world. So thank you for being here, Keith. Thank you for saying hello. Don't worry, we're going to be answering a lot of people's questions, but as always, I'm not able to answer every single one, right? So if you want to have a lot of really good information, a lot of your questions have probably already been answered on our blog post. And I can't reiterate this enough. I highly encourage everyone to go to mexicorelocationguide.com. It's on my signature here down below. And we have a lot of these questions that you guys usually post on these live streams already answered. Hello, Khalid. Thank you so much for being here from Florida. How are you doing? How's everything after the couple of hurricanes that you guys got out there? Watching us from San Diego. Hello. Los Angeles. Go Dodgers. Woohoo. Seattle. St. Augustine, Florida. Okay. Scranton, Pennsylvania. We don't get a lot of people from Pennsylvania, so thank you for being here tonight. Buenas tardes from Maryland. Ottawa, Canada, thank you so much for being here. Toronto, getting chilly. Ooh, I bet you guys are starting to get that little peek of what the winter is going to bring. Well, luckily for you, there's a lot of places in Mexico where it doesn't get really cold and it really never gets really too hot either. Because I know a lot of people from Canada think that they want to live on the beach and, they just picture themselves never having to deal with another Canadian winter. But then sometimes they move to the beach and then they think, oh, this is too hot for me. So luckily, Mexico has a lot of really, really great Central Highland cities that don't get too hot or too hot for too long, and then also don't get cold or too cold for too long, which is kind of like your springtime weather in Canada, just year round. So anyway, if you're interested in learning more about those Central Highlands, I have a blog post about that on our website. And then, of course, we've done a couple of videos on that. East LA, baby. I love it. Playa del Carmen. Okay. Vancouver, Washington. Mexico City. So we're all over the place. Thank you all so much for being here. All right. I'm going to get right into it because your time is valuable. So the first thing that I want to mention, and the first updates that I'm going to give everyone before I get into your questions. So please start posting your questions because, again, this live stream is for you. And I see already a couple of questions being posted. But I'm going to share some updates regarding Mexican residency visas. Now, the very first thing that I think is a change that maybe some of you guys aren't aware of is that immigration, the Instituto Nacional de Migración, so INM in Mexico, historically used to ask everybody to show up in person to then be given an appointment for whatever process it was that you were doing, whether it was you were doing canje or maybe you were doing family unity, or perhaps you were doing a change of address or whatever trámite or legal process that you were visiting the INM for. They would usually ask you to show up in person. You would get a ticket and then you would either get an appointment that same day or maybe you would get it for a following day or a following week. Well, now a lot of INM offices are changing to requiring applicants to schedule online appointments. But of course, with everything in Mexican bureaucracy and whenever they roll out these new online systems, there's issues and there's usually little hiccups that they have to. It's understandable, right? I mean, if we have any developers or we have any web wizards on this live stream tonight, you know that with anytime you roll out something new, there's going to be hiccups. So one of the hiccups is that with the INM online system from the facilitators that we're working with, some of the feedback that I've gotten is that unfortunately, when people schedule appointments, if they cancel them, sometimes the system won't allow them to schedule a new appointment. It used to be that you would have to wait 48 hours to be able to schedule an appointment in the future. But now the system isn't allowing them to schedule an appointment, not everywhere, not in every I&M office, and not with every person that cancels their appointment. But a lot of people, whenever they go to cancel their appointment, and then usually that's because maybe travel plans have changed or something has changed that you now need to reschedule it and you can't actually show up for that appointment you have scheduled. It's not allowing them to schedule one for the future with that person's same information. So usually it's your passport number, your FMM information. And unfortunately, the system has a glitch. So how long will it take for them to fix it? I don't know. There are some workarounds that the facilitators are doing for their customers where they personally are scheduling these appointments for them. But if you're doing this on your own and you're not hiring a facilitator, I urge you to be very careful about scheduling an appointment if you don't actually plan on showing up to that appointment. So I would err more on the side of caution and scheduling the appointment close to when you actually know you're going to travel to Mexico and be able to attend that I&M office on the date of your appointment, and err on the caution of not scheduling it to preemptively thinking that you're going to be there maybe in a month and then you haven't even booked your flight, or you haven't really made any travel arrangements, you haven't taken off work, or whatever you need to do to be able to make that appointment. So that is a tidbit of information right now. Now, of course, this can change in a week, tomorrow, a couple of hours from now, right? It just depends on when I&M gets just a smell of this and is able to then make changes to allow people who cancel appointments to be able to make future appointments. So that's update number one. Update number two is that, as you probably know, if you're doing your residency visa, if you're barely starting that process, if you're just in the research phases of moving to Mexico and you're not even sure whether you're going to be moving to Mexico, all of these residency updates don't really apply to you because you're not even applying for a residency visa quite yet. But if you are, one of the things that we have seen across the board is that for those people who are applying based on economic solvency, more and more consulates are starting to decrease the number of appointments that they have available for the rest of the year. And so you might be seeing this with some of the popular consulates that we recommend, for example, Boise, Phoenix, some other consulates that, are now telling customers, like, we don't have, or applicants, we don't have any appointments until next year. So some of the consulates that we still recommend, that we prefer, that we know a lot of applicants, our customers have worked with, have had a really positive experience with, are DC, New Jersey, Boise, of course, but as of right now, they've told people they don't have appointments until next year. Of course, that can change maybe in November, December, if for whatever reason they happen to have more resources or more appointments available, or they happen to open up some more. But as of right now, October 29th, 2024, we recommend DC, New Jersey, Las Vegas, Raleigh, and there are a couple of others that our immigration facilitators also recommend to their clients. First and foremost, we recommend that you apply at the Mexican consulate closest to you, so that you don't have to incur any travel expenses, right? If you are able to just drive to your nearest consulate. But of course, there are some of you who are pressed on time and maybe need to get your consulate appointment as soon as possible. So those are usually the reasons why we ask people, or we recommend to people, that they travel. And so for those of you who are pressed on time and need to travel, DC, New Jersey, Las Vegas tend to be very helpful. Raleigh, McAllen, although McAllen, it's still kind of up in the air whether they're only allowing Texas residents. I've heard from some people, from some applicants who recently went to McAllen, who were not from Texas, did not have a Texas ID, did not have anything really to prove that they were from Texas, and they were allowed to have an appointment in McAllen. So again, it just seems like, as with everything in Mexican bureaucracy, something that you will learn is that it is unfortunately consistently inconsistent. And so whatever happens with one person, and they might tell you their experience might be totally different for another applicant. But across the board, we are seeing some of these consulates just kind of decrease the number of appointments that they have available for the rest of the year. So I urge you to then, if they have an appointment available at a consulate near you, make that appointment if you want to apply sooner than later, especially before the end of the year. The other thing that I want to urge everybody to be careful with is to not rely on the information that the consulates have on their websites. Usually, or not usually, but a lot of the times, the consulate's websites are not updated, or they update a section of it, but they don't update this other section, which then corresponds to this very important section, and it's very confusing for you as the applicant. So I would urge you to be careful unless you know all of the history of immigration in the last 5 years. I would say it's very likely that if you're reading this, you won't know what is updated and what isn't. We do give you a lot of this information in our free residency guide, which again, if you go to mexicorelocationguide.com and you look at our free resources, there's a drop down which shows you our free Mexican residency guide. And I show you a lot of these like nuances and things to watch out for. Of course, if you're a customer of the Mexico Relocation Guide, we give you even more details and all the little things that you need to watch out for, so that you're well aware of whether something is updated or not, or what to look out for, and how to be your best advocate. But anyway, so I would say don't rely solely on the information that you get from the consulate's websites. My best advice is obviously using resources like we have on the Mexico Relocation Guide, which we don't publish anything unless we have absolutely fact-checked it. And then, of course, I also recommend working with a reputable immigration facilitator that has experience scheduling appointments for their clients at Mexican consulates or embassies abroad. Another thing that I think is a misconception is, what is the difference between an immigration office in Mexico and a consulate abroad? Well, the consulates abroad are there for the Mexicans that live abroad. Now, obviously, they also offer services like residency visas for foreigners who want to then move to Mexico, but they're primarily there to help and assist the Mexicans that are living abroad, whereas the immigration offices in Mexico are there to assist the foreigners that are coming in. So just a little bit of a difference, because I hear some people say, like, I went to the consulate, but they're really talking about the immigration office in Mexico, or INM. So just nuances in those two things. One more thing that I'm seeing just trending in different groups and some of our customers' questions, and maybe something that is happening to you or you're wondering about, is permanent residency. And permanent residency, it seems, is becoming, notably harder to obtain, right? Like, it's almost like if you get permanent residency, it's just kind of miraculous, honestly, because there are people who qualify, who have economic solvency to qualify for it, who have, pensions or social security letters, and they are retired and they meet the age requirement and they live in the area, and almost like the stars all have to align for a consulate to issue you permanent residency when you qualify. But yet we are seeing more and more consulates actually deny people with really no grounds and really no explanation as to why. Luckily, they are given temporary residency. So, it's not the end of the world. You are still a resident of Mexico, and residency in Mexico across the board has the same benefits, whether it's a permanent residency or temporary. The biggest difference is that for permanent residency, you don't have to renew it, whereas for temporary residency, you will have to renew it after the first year. Depending on how you obtain that temporary residency is how much you have to renew it for. So whether you got it through a spouse of a Mexican national or a spouse of another resident, then you're given different time frames for that. But most people who are going for a residency are doing it through economic solvency, and therefore they are given that temporary residency for 1 year initially, and then after that you can renew it for three additional years, for a total of 4 years. After 4 years, you can then apply to become a permanent resident without having to fulfill the financial solvency requirements. So if this is you and you are thinking like, oh no, I just became a temporary resident and what does this mean? Don't worry. you have the same benefits. You're still able to live in Mexico. You're still able to buy property. You have all the same benefits as a permanent resident, with the exception that you will have to renew your residency after that first initial year. So something to know. For those of you who are going to be petitioning family members and all the ins and outs of knowing, which family members you can petition, what kind of documents you need to have available to you to petition your family, and all those things are now updated on our blog post. So I want to redirect you to mexicorelocationguide.com/blog. It's probably the first or third, the first 1 to 3 blogs that I have posted recently, just depending on when you're watching this replay. But we've just updated that kind of quick guide to help you understand how to petition family members, which ones you can petition, what are some of the fees associated with that, what are the documents that you need to have available to you. And I can't reiterate this enough. An immigration facilitator in Mexico, hiring one is probably the best money you will ever spend to help you with this process, particularly with something like family unity visas, because luckily Mexico is very pro-family. So you don't have to meet the financial solvency requirements for family members as long as you are already a resident of Mexico or a national of Mexico. However, there are more steps to take if you are going to be petitioning your family from within Mexico, such as having, marriage certificates apostilled and also officially translated, having birth certificates apostilled and then also officially translated if you're petitioning, for example, children or parents. So I highly recommend working with a reputable immigration facilitator because, again, not all facilitators know what they're doing. And I've seen this a lot of times where, people have been taken advantage of or have been scammed, or somebody promised them that they would get a 4-year residency visa, not through the regularization, but just that they would magically be able to give them a 4-year residency visa by paying, a little bit more than usual up front, and then they never hear from those people. So it's really important that you do your due diligence and hire the right people. Obviously, not everybody in Mexico is out to scam you. I also don't want to put that in this live stream or in your head that, just because you're moving to Mexico, everybody's looking out to scam you. There are more good people than there are scammers out there. It also doesn't mean that just because somebody is a person of your country that they are not out to scam people. So, also something to consider. Just because somebody's from the United States or Canada or somewhere in Europe where you're from doesn't mean that they are any more trustworthy than a Mexican who is able to do this process for you and can also speak English and knows probably the process better than a foreigner who has just been helping people on the side here and now. So anyway, let's get into some of your questions. Thank you all again so much for being here. Let me get through some of these. So regarding healthcare, medical coverage, Bob, thank you so much for being here. It's going to depend a lot on your age, what type of coverage you're going to be getting, what your medical history is. I've done a lot of live streams with several healthcare brokers who have just kind of explained how the healthcare system works in Mexico, what kind of services they offer, how they can help you get a quote. So I highly encourage you to go check out those videos. But if you're not much for watching one of those videos, I've also written some blog posts on what are your healthcare options in Mexico. And then I give you in that blog post some of the people that we recommend working with. And the reason I do that is because before you move to Mexico, knowing whether you can be covered for healthcare, I think, is pretty important. It's almost right up there with knowing whether you qualify for residency or not. I think before moving to Mexico, before really deciding if Mexico is the right place for you, I think everyone needs to really determine if they qualify for residency and if they can afford to move. And affording to move also includes knowing whether, if you have especially a chronic condition, a healthcare chronic condition that requires a lot of medical intervention and a lot of medical care, those things can add up if you're not able to get covered in Mexico. So It's something that you really need to consider before moving to Mexico, and you need to understand how the healthcare system works. So for that, I wrote a blog post that gives you a lot of really good information on how the public healthcare system works, how the private healthcare system works, and then how to find a good healthcare broker that can help you find insurance that will cover you whether you have specific pre-existing conditions or not, and help you get the best insurance coverage for your specific lifestyle, your age, your situation. But what the coverage and cost is in and around Playa del Carmen will totally depend whether you're going to be paying out of pocket or if you're going to be insured. And the cost for insurance is totally going to depend on your age, or your lifestyle, your medical history, all that. So again, Bob, I recommend that you look at the blog post that I just posted in the comments. I will say, though, that Mexico, of course, is a huge medical tourism country, and that is growing more and more and more every year because there are great hospitals, there are great doctors, and the costs are very accessible. They're very reasonable for people who do not have health insurance in Mexico. So knowing that, you should kind of get an idea that it is very accessible, especially when you're comparing it to a country like the United States, where costs for medical care are just, I mean, it's outrageous. It's straight up extortion, even if you have medical insurance. So anyway, so I would encourage you to go look at that blog post, but it all depends on many factors. It's not an easy answer. I can't decide between Ensenada and Mexico City. I love both. Hi, Andres. Thank you so much for being here. They're both very different cities, completely different. So I would say it sounds like you've been to both, which is great. I think that's very, very, very wise of you. And I would say that, it's important for anybody here watching to have a short list of places that you're thinking of moving to in Mexico. Maybe it's like Andres, maybe it's 2 places that you're thinking. But I think that a lot of you, we publish these videos, and maybe you watch other YouTubers that publish other videos, and you read blog posts, and you see a lot of people posting, some of like the best places to live. But no amount of YouTube videos and no amount of blog posts are ever going to replace your personal experience. I can't emphasize that enough. You have to experience it for yourself. You have to be there. You have to know whether, you like the food, whether you like the infrastructure, whether the energy feels right for you, if the houses or the architecture is interesting to you, whether it's too much hustle and bustle, if it's too touristy of an area, or if it's too rural and too kind of quiet and boring of an area. If you're living in a very small town that maybe seems really charming, but can you really see yourself making a lot of friends there? So I say that for that, I really recommend that you spend at least a month in any one city that you're seriously considering. Of course, depending on your resources and whether you can afford it and all those things, right? If you can only afford to move once and you can only afford to go to a place once, then obviously choose the place that you feel speaks most to you. But I think it would be smart to spend at least a month, probably longer than that, in any one place that you're seriously considering before you actually spend a month or a week or 6 months in any one place. I highly encourage you to actually scout the area, right? Go and actually visit the area. Spend at least 24 hours, if not at least a week, just checking out the area, right? And seeing, like, can you actually see yourself living in that specific place? Do you like the weather? Can you handle the elevation if it's in a high elevation area? Can you handle the heat if it's in a beach? Especially in the summer, right? So I highly encourage people to actually visit before just deciding, like, because you watched this specific YouTube video or you heard this one person's story, that is the place that you want to go live in. We do have a variety of private relocation tours across Mexico. So, I mean, we have them in various different cities. And these are local people who will show you around, take you to a mercado, take you to a local market, right? So you can see what the quality of food is like, what the conditions of the food is like, what the condition of the stalls that the people are selling their food is like, what the streets are like, what the infrastructure of that city is like. And then they will also answer a lot of questions just from that local's perspective on What are the pros and cons of living in that city? So that you get kind of like a boot camp experience of, whether you're going to be living in Tepoztlán, or you're going to be living in Mexico City, or you're going to be moving to Los Cabos or Playa del Carmen. Those are all very, very different cities. So, it's good to have that local person give you their take. Also, it's really convenient to not have to figure out how to get around in that city, right? Like, especially Mexico City, or especially somewhere like Cancun or Playa del Carmen, or, some of these very touristy areas where there can almost be a lot of traffic, and maybe driving can be really intimidating to you. So anyway, there's a lot of pros to having a local show you around, but if you don't hire one of our private relocation tour guides, I still recommend that you at least go down there on your own and visit, and really, take it in and see if it's something that, if it's a place that you can really see yourself living in. Thanks for being here, Andres. Hi, Deidre. Thank you so much for being here. Can you walk me through the process of moving down a few items? So, for example, you're towing a small trailer with your own car as a temporary resident, card in hand. Yeah. This is something really important that I think a lot of people have maybe some confusion about, and that's the menaje de casa. There is a document that you can apply for at your local consulate, which is a menaje de casa. If you're going to be using an international moving company, it is absolutely necessary for you to have, because they will then use that document to talk to customs and release your items, because you're having a third party essentially move things for you. For you, Deidre, since you're moving things down in a few boxes and towing a small trailer with your own car, then you don't need this menaje de casa. You can just, drive across the border. Most likely, I highly recommend that you do label all your items. Whatever is in your boxes, you put box number 1, and that you have a list of what's inside box number 1. Just in case they stop you and they ask you what is in your trailer, what is in your boxes, right? So I do highly recommend that you do that. Now, of course, there is a chance that maybe if the customs agent where you decide to drive across the border decides that some of your items need to pay some customs tax. And of course, these are usually very reasonable. I mean, the most I've heard anybody pay for having, a whole trailer full of things was $300. And that, I think, is actually on the high side. But most people are just way through. And if they are asked to pay anything, it's usually very, very, very minimal. But that would be the process. Now, the other thing that you need to consider is, since you're going to be driving down as a temporary resident, you will have to stop by customs and ask for a temporary import permit. The other thing you will also have to do is stop at immigration. INM looks for those letters, and then get your FMM. Because as a temporary resident, you actually have a card already. So forget what I just said. But as a temporary resident, you will have to get your temporary import permit. If you were coming down to do your canje, which means that you have a temporary resident sticker, or a pre-approval basically from your consulate, your Mexican consulate abroad, you would have to stop by INM and get your FMM to be able to then get your residency card, because without that, the INM has no registry of you ever coming into the country, and they need that in order for them to process your canje and therefore give you a residency card. So it all depends. Deidre, yours is very straightforward. You just have to stop at Banjército, pay your temporary import permit. Once you actually renew your temporary residency card, you will have to go to a customs office, depending on which city you live in. Sometimes they're in airports across Mexico, and sometimes they are in a standalone office. But depending on which city you live in, you will have to go to your Banjército or your customs office and then extend that temporary import permit. There is some paperwork alongside with that, and that then gives you permission to continue driving your foreign plated vehicle with your new, the new allowance that you have on your temporary residency card. So your temporary import permit at the beginning will be for 1 year, and then once you renew your residency, you will have to then renew your, it's not really a renewal, but you do have to process some paperwork to then make your temporary import permit good. If you don't, it's not the end of the world, but you will basically forfeit your deposit. So if you don't do it within a certain time, if you don't do it, then it is a pretty big deal. If you get stopped by Tránsito, and that's a highway police, and you don't have your temporary import permit documents in order, then your car can get impounded. But if there is a time frame where you're supposed to extend that temporary import permit, it's usually 5 days from when you renew your temporary residency. So just keep an eye out for that. And these little things do change from one city to another. So it is important for you to know what the local requirements are. Again, most of the immigration facilitators that we recommend in our online guide also help our customers extend that temporary import permit once they renew their temporary residency. So you can use the same person. They can help facilitate that process for you if you ended up hiring somebody from our online guide. That's basically the simple version of that. There are more details to that, but that's simply the simple version of that for the sake of this live stream, to not take up the entire episode on that. Update on the INM appointments for which specific are not doing it yet, i.e. meaning still walk up. Last I heard, Chapala is a city that is very popular amongst our community, especially with people who are wanting to retire in Mexico. It's about an hour away from Guadalajara. And the Chapala office, last I heard, was not taking online appointments. They were still doing a walk-in basis only. There are other offices. From what I understand, it's the main offices that are taking online appointments, and then some of the subrepresentaciones, which are basically like satellite offices, but not all of them. So really the only way to know is to go make an online appointment. And if the office that you're trying to make an online appointment at doesn't show up, then that's very telling that they are only taking walk-ins. But from what I understand, they're pretty much rolling it out through the entire country. This is very new. This just got released like earlier in September. So, it's only like a month and a week old. I think they're going to roll it out. I think this is all speculation. I think they're going to roll it out to more cities across Mexico. But of course, as soon as we know more information, I will share it with you guys and keep you guys posted. That's awesome, Keith. Congratulations. He just renewed his residency. That's great. Great news. So yeah, DC, I hear a lot of people have a really good experience in DC, and I'm so excited. I mean, for starters, I think DC is relatively easy to get to. There's a lot of flights from all across the United States. Canadians can also go apply in DC. So if you're watching us from Canada and you're looking at consulates in the United States where you can apply, DC is an option. They seem to be very flexible, also not flexible, but not as rigid as other consulates in their requirements. And what I mean by that is sometimes these Mexican consulates, they will tell you that they require a specific piece of paper or document that is nowhere on their website. They didn't give you any information of that before you actually showed up to your appointment. And then they surprise applicants with this information the minute that they show up. Luckily, a lot of people nowadays have access to bank statements and these kinds of things on their phones or on their tablets. And then some consulates are flexible enough to tell you, like, okay, just show me, your screen and show me the proof of whatever it is that they're asking you for. And some consulates allow that. Some will be very strict to just take photocopies. So when in doubt, I would say just come overly prepared. If you have bank statements that are dating back 12 months and you get 8 pages per statement and you have 12 months going back, I would say print every single one. I think it's just better to be over prepared. I know it's a nuisance to have, a binder of documents because you don't know what they're going to be asking you for, how many copies of that, or whether they need the first page of that statement or the last. But I would say just to be cautious, bring every single one. Another thing that a lot of people this is going to be an unpopular opinion because I know a lot of people on here are very scared of sharing very sensitive information, as you should be. However, you have to understand that the consulates are not your typical person, right? Like you're not just sharing this information with John Doe down the street or John Doe email at gmail.com. So if a consulate is asking you for bank statements, I think it's important to not redact important information, like, for example, account numbers. I see some people, just like marking it out with black pen or black Sharpie. And although maybe some of you have successfully been given residency, regardless of, just crossing out some of that information, I do think that it's not necessary. And I think that anything you can do to give yourself as many chances of being successful in your residency process, do it. So redacting sensitive information for a consulate might actually raise a red flag with them, or you might be giving them an excuse to just question whether this statement is actually valid and what information was redacted on it and what is not. And so I think just to help you out, just don't redact any information on your statements. Of course, I will leave that up to you and you run the risk, but in my personal opinion, it's not necessary for consulates. If you're working with a facilitator and they are asking you for sensitive information like pictures of your passport, pictures of, your marriage certificate, apostilled, or, that kind of sensitive information, especially if you got their contact information from our online guide, they are trustworthy. So, I would say it's okay for you to share that information. But of course, I will also leave it up to you if it doesn't feel right because they're asking you to share it over WhatsApp or, something like that you just don't feel personally comfortable sharing your sensitive information. I will, of course, leave that up to you. And most facilitators understand that. But I will say that if you're going to be working with a professional from our online guide, I wouldn't say this about every facilitator out there because, again, there are a lot of facilitators and I wouldn't say all of them are trustworthy. There are definitely some that I would say stay away, as far away from them as possible. But the ones that we do recommend and that we think are very reputable and trustworthy, it's totally okay to share whatever they are asking you for regarding, your passport, marriage information, birth certificates, those kinds of things. So just keep that in mind. Thank you, Rick, for being here. Quick question. Are all residente permanente automatically allowed to work in Mexico? You are, as a residente permanente. This is actually a good distinction between the benefits of a temporary resident and a permanent resident that I didn't make earlier. So yes, you do get all the same benefits as a temporary resident and as a permanent resident. There are some exceptions, like, for example, being able to work, right? So residente permanentes, or permanent residents, are given implied permission to work. You do still have to notify INM of any employment that you are caring about or any changes to your employment. However, you don't need to explicitly ask for permission from the immigration authorities in Mexico to work. It's implied. Whereas with a temporary residency visa, you do have to ask for permission from the immigration authorities to process a work permit. That is something different. Another difference, of course, is what I talked about with earlier, the lady that asked us about what is the process for moving my trailer and my things to Mexico. And with temporary residency, you are allowed to drive your foreign plated vehicle for the duration of your temporary residency. Because it has kind of an expiration date, you're only allowed to be a temporary resident for up to 4 years. Then you're only allowed to drive your foreign plated car in Mexico for up to 4 years. Permanent residents are not allowed to drive their foreign plated cars in Mexico, unfortunately, because Mexico obviously wants you to buy cars in Mexico. They want you to register your car in Mexico. That is revenue, that is income, those are taxes for Mexico that then, a foreign resident wouldn't necessarily pay. You do pay a deposit to Banjército to be able, or to customs, essentially, the customs bank, to be able to process your temporary import permit. However, that deposit is given back to you when you turn in your temporary import permit, when you drive out of Mexico with your foreign plated car. So anyway, not to hijack your post, Rick, but yes, you are essentially given implied permission to work in Mexico, and you don't need to necessarily process the permission to work in Mexico. However, you do still need to notify immigration of any work in Mexico. The other thing that you also need to keep in mind is if you are going to be working in Mexico, it's important for you to register with SAT and then change your situación fiscal, or your fiscal obligation, to somebody who is working, as opposed to somebody who is just registered with SAT and has an RFC without actually working. So something for you to keep in mind, because that'll be needed for you to file taxes. If you're going to be opening up a business, that'll be needed. If you want to buy a property and you plan to rent it out and generate some income out of that, you will need that as well to be able to pay taxes and all those things. So that is actually working in Mexico and generating an income in Mexico. For those of you who do not plan to work in Mexico, so let's say that either you're retiring or maybe you are working for a company outside of Mexico, your income does not come from a Mexican source. So meaning, you don't sell timeshares, you don't sell real estate, you don't sell any services in Mexico, meaning you're not also like a facilitator or, selling, all these other services that sometimes foreigners sell to other foreigners. You're not, working for a Mexican company. You're not driving for Uber. You're not generating an income in Mexico, right? So if you're not generating an income in Mexico, you do not need to file income taxes in Mexico. If you are generating an income in Mexico, whether you're doing any one of the things that I just mentioned or something else that generates you an income in Mexico, and that also includes maybe working for a Mexican company, even if it's abroad. It just depends on what, the agreement is between the two countries that you have, between Mexico and wherever it is that you're coming from. But for most of you who are watching this channel, you're not usually working in Mexico. Some of you are working remotely for a company overseas and then moving to Mexico, whether it's in the United States or Canada or somewhere in Europe, and then you're just working remotely in Mexico. So if that's the case, you do not need to file taxes in Mexico, and Mexico will not tax your Social Security income or your pensions. But if you are working in Mexico, then you need to know that you are fiscally responsible to pay taxes in Mexico. Kylan, thank you so much for being here. Some feedback. He says, I was able to get 2 appointments at the Las Vegas Consulate within 6. They were hesitant at first because I'm from California, but they told me to come back since I had already started the process. Good to know. Thank you so much for sharing that feedback for everybody to know. Yeah, Las Vegas, again, I love the Las Vegas Mexican Consulate. I mean, it's rare that they deny somebody, especially if people come prepared. And they do have a lot of the information that they require on their website. If you're wondering how to find a Mexican consulate's website, you can just Google Mexican Consulate and the name of the city where you live. Usually Google is very smart and knows what Mexican consulate is nearest to you if there isn't a Mexican consulate in that specific city. And then you can go directly to their website. Now, the other thing that you need to look out for is that their domain ends in .sre, .gov, .mx. Very important, because there are some other websites that call themselves Mexican consulate websites, and they're not actually official government websites. So keep that in mind. Planning to get permanent residency. I have an adult child with a mental disability. Will it be difficult to get temporary residency or permanent residency for my adult child? It isn't as straightforward as just petitioning your spouse or petitioning a child that is under the age of 18 and not married. So yes, there are more hoops that you will have to jump through. It's not impossible. We have had customers actually petition for their whether it's a mental disability or maybe it's a child who has some other type of disability, right? So we have had customers that are able to do this successfully, but the amount of paperwork that was required from them is significantly more than somebody who is going to just ask for their spouse or a child that is under the age of 18 and not married, or maybe even their parents. So I will say that I think if you're going to petition for your child who is an adult and might require more documents, I will say that an immigration facilitator is something that you really need to consider. I'm not saying it's impossible for you to do any of this, by the way, for any of you. It's not impossible for you to move forward in this process without an immigration facilitator. But I will say that the amount of times that we are given emails or people write to us or people comment on our videos or customers talk to me, or even non-customers that tell me like, wow, I was at immigration today and I saw, 5, 3, 2, whatever number of couples or individuals who tried to do it on their own and were just sent away over and over again. And they were so glad to have had an immigration facilitator there with them, prepared, and knows exactly what immigration is going to ask them for, and knows exactly what the process is like, and can give them it's just really peace of mind. And also it's helping you, especially if you're pressed for time and coming to Mexico to specifically get this process done, because maybe you're not moving to Mexico right away and you need to get it done within this period of time. I think it's really important. But specifically for this, where it's not as straightforward as a process than if you were petitioning for other family members, I would say it's really important for you to consider hiring an immigration facilitator. And we do have some excellent recommendations that live all across Mexico. So it doesn't matter whether you're starting your process in, Cozumel, or you're doing your process in Guadalajara, or you're doing your process in Mexico City, or we have immigration facilitators all across the nation. And then if for whatever reason you live in a city where we don't have an immigration facilitator, we do have several recommendations that have helped our customers remotely. So they will do all the paperwork for you, and they won't accompany you to the immigration offices, but they will do all the paperwork for you and equip you so that all you have to do is show up to the immigration offices. They'll even schedule the online appointment for you if they have online appointments. And all you have to do is show up with the documents that they require. Everything should be in order, and you should have as much success. Obviously, it's not the same as having, like, if there is a glitch in the system or the immigration agent has a question and you don't have somebody there to help kind of answer for you. It's not that it's the end of the world, but it does give a lot of our customers peace of mind to have somebody there that just, can kind of speak the same lingo. But yeah, immigration, by the way, I don't want to scare anyone and think that immigration agents are scary or like mean or mean-spirited. They're not. In fact, most of them are there to try to help all the applicants that are coming and trying to apply for residency visas, or the numerous amount of people that are moving to Mexico to apply for residency visas. So they're really there to try to help the applicants. But in Mexican bureaucracy, people are very stoic and very, very just direct. I wouldn't say it's like mean, but it's just, they're just very serious. And some people might think that, it's kind of intimidating, but I would say it's just a way of being in Mexican bureaucracy. You will see this a lot in whenever you go to court or whenever you deal with any sort of Mexican legal process. People are just very direct, and it doesn't mean that they're not helpful, but I think that's something that you need to just take it with a grain of salt, that they are there to help you, even if their presence might show that they are being just very serious. So, but again, I will also say that immigration facilitators are worth their weight in gold, especially the reputable ones. And they have helped our customers get out of so many pickles and so many things that our customers have written to us and told us, wow, I am so glad I had somebody there on my side, because had I not, I might have done the wrong thing, and then I might have actually lost my residency visa because I didn't know otherwise. So they are really there to advocate for you. Catherine says, yep, I met solvency, pension, age, etc., but Los Angeles denied me, saying I needed property or investments in Mexico to prove solvency. They denied you altogether, or they gave you, instead of permanent residency, temporary? I'd love to know, Catherine. Most consulates in California are very difficult to work with, particularly the Los Angeles consulate. I will also say the Miami consulate is particularly difficult to work with. So if you live in California and you're finding that it's difficult to work with the consulate in your vicinity or in your local area, I think it's worth traveling to Las Vegas for. So Catherine, don't give up. If you meet all the financial solvency requirements, you have a pension, you meet the age requirements, and you do not need property or investments in Mexico to be able to prove solvency. That is something that it's not written anywhere. That's something that they left it up to their own interpretation. But of course, I don't want you to fight with them, and I don't want you to argue with any consulate employee, because at the end of the day, they do have the final say, and they do operate with some level of autonomy, one from the other. That's why the requirements vary so much from one to the other. Hopefully that will change with this new administration. I really hope so. I hope there's some form of uniformity, just for my own sanity, but also for yours, so that you can have some level of confidence going in, knowing that, somebody applied in Chicago, you'll have about the same process in Orlando. Are there facilitators to assist with getting married in Mexico? Not a wedding, but the actions to take for legal marriage. Zeno, thank you so much for being here. Yes, we've had several customers actually who legally got married in Mexico because they wanted to do the family unity visa and petition their spouse. But there was, whenever you do any process in Mexico, names are very important. And so if I, Mariana Lima is my maiden name, got married to a Lang, and now I changed my last name Lima to a Lang, right? But my original passport says Mariana Lima. However, my marriage certificate says Mariana Lang. And so they're not exactly the same. And because of that, I'm not the same person to immigration, right? And so you normally have to have some form of document that shows that you are indeed the same person, but it doesn't always work. So for this, some people have had to get married in Mexico because changing their name in their state, or maybe having the documents to prove that they are indeed the same person, is too tedious. So it's sometimes in their best interest to just get married in Mexico and have a marriage certificate that you then don't need to get apostilled, and then you also don't need to get translated, and it shows the same last name that you want to show, or whatever the name is. Sometimes it's a middle name, and sometimes it's abbreviated with an N when maybe your full middle name is Nancy, but it shows that on your passport and maybe not on your marriage certificate, or vice versa. So anyway, Mexico is very, very particular with last names, with full names. So if it's not exactly the same on a marriage certificate as it is on your passport, there might be issues. In fact, there will be issues. So some people have gotten married. So yes, to answer your question, yes, we do have facilitators that have helped our customers get married in Mexico. That is done with Registro Civil, and that is a different authority than the immigration authorities. But yes, that is something that some of our facilitators have helped our customers with. Particularly one that I can think of is in Cancun, and he has helped numerous people get married and help them with the process of getting married, to be able to then have them successfully complete their family unity. So we have permanent residency and are moving from Panama by plane with 10 boxes of household stuff. We have an inventory, but no formal menaje de casa from the emissary. Yeah, don't worry. If you're flying in, thank you so much for being here, Chris. If you're flying in, don't worry. If you're bringing in those 10 boxes of household things, they are your household things. The menaje de casa is important whenever you are going to be using a third party. So for example, if you were actually sending those things by plane through a third party like FedEx or DHL, or some other fleet or some other third-party shipping company, then they would need it in order for them to be able to release these things from customs. For plane, if you're moving these things with you on your person, then it shouldn't be an issue. For things by plane, for people actually sending things through shipping company, I would actually be not entirely sincere if I told you that the menaje de casa is also needed for that. I don't know if you need a menaje de casa if you're going to be using a third party like DHL or, FedEx or something like that. I would be pretty confident in saying that you probably will, but I know more the process of that going through a land border. So if you are using a third party to ship your things, they should know exactly what documents you need in order for those items to not be held up in customs. So I would really refer to them to make sure that your things are not held up in customs, because it can be a pain in the butt to have customs release your things. It can be a pain. I mean, in most cases, it doesn't work out if you're not actually shipping them with you. If you're shipping them with you, like they're in you're basically shipping them as oversized baggage or, something like that, then it shouldn't be a problem. But if you're using a third party, I don't know if you need a menaje de casa. I would really ask them. Hi, Kate. Thank you so much for being here. I love your profile picture. I love it when people put profile pictures on their names. Do my husband and I have to meet economic solvency in year 2, 3, and 4? No, you do not. So I'm assuming you're talking about temporary residency. For temporary residence, whenever you are given residency, if you're given residency based on economic solvency, you're usually given a 1-year temporary residency, and then you have to renew it. You can renew it for 1 additional year, 2 additional years, or 3 additional years. I recommend renewing it for 3 additional years. Like, don't even mess around with renewing for 1 additional year or 2 additional years. Just go for 3 years. Even if you don't know if you're going to be moving to Mexico in 4 years, just go ahead and renew it. That way you don't have to worry about it. You don't know when things are going to change. I would just go ahead and renew it for 3 additional years. But no, you do not need to show economic solvency again to renew for 2, 3, and the 4th year. But again, I recommend renewing for 3. However, there could be a situation where the immigration agent might ask you, or in this case, might ask, your facilitator might be told that you will need to show some form of proof that you have funds available to you. This used to be more common about 2 years ago across like 5 different immigration offices in Mexico. It's less common now, but I say this because it could happen. Like, it could be a one-off where they just want to make sure that you have funds available to you to live in Mexico, that you're not just running on empty. And they don't need to see a specific economic solvency amount, but they just want to see that you have some money available to you. And that could be savings, that could be your checking account. They just want to be able to see that you, Kate, or whoever else is watching and wondering the same question, is going to be able to pay their rent and not have to be a strain on the Mexican government or, apply for Mexican social programs or things like that. So they're not looking for the economic solvency requirements that the consulates are looking for, but they could be looking just to make sure that you have some funds available to you. And this is less common than it used to be, like I mentioned, 2 to 3 years ago. Rosendo, thank you so much for being here. Are there houses that cost $50,000 in small pueblos? Is that realistic? Absolutely. You don't even have to be in a small pueblo. I just saw some houses the other day in Querétaro that were selling for $1 million pesos. That's $50,000. They were very humble, but they were nice. They were not shacks. They were very, very nice for $1 million pesos. $50,000. They were 2 stories, 2 bedrooms. They were basic in that, the kitchen was not like a cocina integral. So it just had like a cook plate, and it had, just a sink. It doesn't come with any appliances. So you would have to buy all of those. It doesn't come with like a washer and dryer outlet. You would have to get that set up with a plumber. It has a lavandero, so it's like a concrete slab with ridges, and that's what people use in houses that are that affordable to wash their clothes, and then they line dry them. But it is absolutely possible. And then they also don't have like a lot of really upscale light fixtures and things like that. Like it might just be a bulb hanging from the ceiling with the wires, right? So you would have to install light fixtures, ceiling fans, those kinds of things. It might not have the fanciest doors between bedrooms, but it has doors. And I mean, they are like, it is a legitimate house with windows and doors and floors and concrete walls and stucco, and they're nice, and they have like even a little parking area for your car. These houses usually tend to be in like in coto, or like in privadas, which are very, very small gated communities that are usually, for like the middle class people who, also own houses around this cost. But it is very possible. It's also possible to buy a lot and then build your house for $1,000,000 pesos. I wouldn't say it's going to be the most extravagant home. It's not going to be, I also want everybody to be realistic that you're not going to live in Mexico like a king on pennies, right? You can live very comfortably and you can live on very little. A lot of people do, but they're not living extravagantly, especially not to the level of consumerism that maybe a lot of people are used to in the United States or Canada, where, if you want a fast food burger, you just go get it. Or if you want, a soda, you just go get it. Like a lot of people are living very much, they might not eat meat every day, or they might eat meat, once a week. So, I'm just saying, like, you have to be realistic too, that if somebody is saying that they're living on $1,000 or, 30,000 pesos or 20,000 pesos, that you have to understand that they're probably living very moderately. They have all their basic necessities met, so they're eating every day. There's no doubt about that. They're not going hungry, and they probably are able to afford their medicines and those kinds of things. But they're probably not living in the way that a lot of people that are watching this channel that are moving from certainly the United States or Canada are used to living. So yes, is it possible? Yes, absolutely. And it's not only possible, it's very much available, not only in small pueblos, but in some major cities, especially in some colonias or neighborhoods that are, working class neighborhoods. And so yes, it's absolutely possible. Yes, you can renew a 1 year and extend it for 3 more years. In fact, we recommend that. So again, for anybody watching, if you're thinking of getting a temporary residency, I highly recommend that after your first year, when you are up for renewal, you renew it for 3 years. Don't mess around with renewing for 1 or 2 or, none of that. Renew for 3 years. Get your 3 years out of the way, and that way you won't have to worry about it until year 4. If you are marrying a Mexican national or a Mexican residente, whether temporary or permanent, you were given 2 years initially. After those 2 years, you can then petition or apply to become a permanent resident. So it's a little bit different for people. It depends on how you're obtaining that temporary residency. And I haven't even talked about the special regularization program. So for a lot of you who are thinking the income requirements are astronomical and they are just through the roof, and there's no way that I'm going to be able to qualify for residency in Mexico in 2025 or even now, the regularization program is a game changer for a lot of you. And I highly encourage you to take advantage of it if you don't qualify for a Mexican residency through economic solvency. Again, if you're just starting the research on moving to Mexico and you don't even know if you're actually going to be moving to Mexico, I still think it's important for you to know about the regularization program, because if it's even you're like within 50% of certainty that you're going to be moving to Mexico, I still think that you should really consider getting residency, especially sooner than later, especially if you're on the cusp of not qualifying based on economic solvency. So for the special regularization program, I mean, it's really, honestly, I know a lot of you think it's a backward system. I personally think it's also kind of strange that that a lot of people are given this 4-year temporary residency without having to prove economic solvency. But that is how the government has set it up, so that people are not irregular in Mexico, because there's no such thing as illegal immigration. You're either regular or you're irregular. And for people who have stayed in Mexico irregular, there is a special program, but it also applies to people who are not currently in Mexico. As long as you have visited Mexico once before 2022 currently. So these are the requirements right now for 2024. In 2025, we don't know what's going to happen. If they do change, I will let you know in 2025 what those requirements are. But right now, as of October 2024, the requirements are that you have visited Mexico at least once before 2022. And when you come back to Mexico, you will need to come, assuming that you're not already in Mexico. If you are in Mexico, then you go to your nearest immigration office and you apply. You just, you've been irregular probably now for some time. If you have been in Mexico for 180 days after you first came to Mexico, then or longer than that, then you're certainly irregular. If you are in Mexico with a current FMM, so you came maybe 2-3 months ago and you were given an FMM for 6 months, you have to wait for that FMM to expire to be able to qualify. And different people are given different timeframes on their FMMs. An FMM is basically your tourist permit. It's essentially a form that is given to foreigners coming to Mexico for immigration to then know that, they're in the country, and it's used for various purposes. But for people that are interested in the special regularization program, that is your ticket to know when you can apply. So if you are coming to Mexico for this regularization program right now, because you've been to Mexico at least once before 2022, then you would need to come as a tourist, and you would need to wait until your FMM expires. Now, most people are given 180 days if you fly to Mexico. So if you come in through an airport, an immigration agent will most likely give you 180 days. Yes, sometimes people are given 30 days, sometimes people are given 10, some people are given 2 months, whatever. But most immigration agents will give you 180 days. If you use the automatic kiosks that are now scattered throughout several airports in Mexico, that are, these big plastic boxes that all you do is scan your passport and it automatically registers you in Mexico, those will automatically give you 180 days. So if you use a kiosk, you have to wait those 6 months before you can actually apply for this special regularization program. But if you don't, then it just depends on what the immigration agent has given you. To know what the immigration agent has given you, you have to download your FMM and see what the time limit is on there. For those of you that are thinking about qualifying or applying for this special program, which, by the way, gives you a 4-year temporary residency visa without you having to prove economic solvency. So that is a game changer, that you don't have to show that you're economically solvent. You don't have to prove that you make X amount of money every month. You don't have to prove that you're employed. You don't have to prove anything. You just have to prove that you're a regular in the country and that you've been to Mexico at least once before 2022. And then, of course, they will do a study, or they will do like an investigation, and you pay a fine for overstaying your visa, right? For basically being irregular. So there is more to it than just that. But you are given a 4-year residency visa without having to prove economic solvency. In some ways, you're even given a little bit of a higher benefit than those that actually come in through economic solvency, because those people have to renew and you don't. But you do have to pay for the 4 years up front. So, and you have to pay a fine. So for people who are coming in through economic solvency, they don't. Anyway, I digress. The point is that if you're coming to Mexico to take advantage of that program, which I highly recommend, I recommend that you actually come in through a land border. If you're wanting to do it before the end of the year, which I do recommend that you take advantage of it before the end of the year, because we never know when they're going to phase out this program. There's been rumors for years. They've had this program since 2021, and there's been rumors for years that they're phasing out this program. But now we're here almost in 2025, and this program is still available. And I think it's a huge money pit or money grab for the government. So I think that's why they keep extending it. But for those of you that are thinking about taking advantage of this, I do think that you should do it before the end of the year. And if you are thinking about doing that, the best way to guarantee that you get a short-term FMM, so meaning you don't get 180 days, because again, if you got 180 days, we'd be looking at March before you could apply, and we don't know what's going to happen in next year. So go through a land border, and a lot of land border agents will allow you to get 7-day FMMs. The one that we have seen a lot of people get guaranteed 7-day FMMs is the CBX land border through Tijuana, bordering, of course, California. But of course, there's other land borders that will give you a short-term FMM. For example, a lot of people come in through Belize and get a short-term FMM that way, and then they just process their regularization in Merida. There are some nuances of how the regularization program works across different immigration offices in Mexico. So again, this is one where I highly, highly, highly recommend working with an immigration facilitator that is familiar with the R&E program or the regularization program, because not all of them are, and there are some nuances that you need to know, especially because they need to do a sort of research into your case and why you're irregular. And then, of course, that is how they decide whether you get this special residency. But yeah, and then also some residency, some facilitator, some immigration offices in Mexico require you to wait 6 months before you can apply. So not all of them will allow you to use a short-term FMM, which is why some people cross in Belize and then they go to Merida or they go to Chetumal, because the Cancun and Playa del Carmen offices are requiring people to wait 6 months before they can apply. For those of you who are wondering, well, I've never visited Mexico before 2022, and I also don't meet the economic solvency requirements right now. Is this like lost hope for me? And I would say, if you have visited Mexico in 2023, there's hope that they will extend this program next year and that all 2023 visits will now be eligible in 2025. And then if you visited this year, the hope is that this program will be available in 2026, and that all those people who have visited in 2024 will now be eligible in 2026. So I would say, visit Mexico and then, hope for the best in 2 years that you will be eligible for this program, because it is a game changer for people. The cost of the program is ranging around $1,000, depending on where you apply, and that does not include immigration facilitator fees. Immigration facilitators charge anywhere from, 5,000 pesos, which is around $250. And I've seen up to, 12,000 pesos, which is around $600. It just depends on who you hire, their level of expertise, where they live, how much work they have, all those things that, businesses can dictate how much they charge for their services. But yeah, I highly, highly encourage you to take advantage of that program if you are one of those people that economic solvency is just not in your cards, and you're also not married to a Mexican national. You don't plan on having any Mexican children. You're not going to be working for a Mexican employer. So, your only way of getting residency is through this program. Kate, we do have facilitators in Veracruz and Jalapa. So yes, definitely check out our complete Mexico relocation guide. If you guys are interested in learning about our Mexico relocation guide, I'm going to leave a link in the comments, or you can go to mexicorelocationguide.com/guide. Thank you so much for buying the guide, Quito Perro. I love it. Thank you. Let's see. I'm going to see if there's any more questions, and I'm going to take probably maybe 1 or 2 more, just because I'm running out of saliva. What is the cost of living in Guadalajara like? Would you recommend someone to live there in Guadalajara? Can you also speak on your favorite beach town? I'm more of a city girl, so I do like beaches. I don't want to say that I don't. I love the beach. I grew up by a beach, but I'm very much a city girl. So this will be maybe a little biased for me. I do really like Cancun, and I really like Playa del Carmen because they are very much city-like beach towns. I would probably be not as excited to live in a smaller town, like for example, Guaymas or, that whole area, or maybe somewhere like, I don't know, thinking like Barra de Navidad or possibly even Bucerías. I love Puerto Vallarta too. I think it's a really cool city. But obviously, this is just my opinion, right? Like, I think you really need to decide for yourself. That's a very personal decision. And this is just me speaking based on my experience. The cost of living in Guadalajara will totally depend on what part of Guadalajara you're going to be living in. Are you living by yourself? Do you have family? Are you going to be renting versus buying a house? Are you going to be eating out all the time? You're going to be taking advantage of all the entertainment options. Guadalajara is very much a foodie city, so there's a ton of restaurants, really great ones, and they range in all prices. If you're interested in knowing some of the things that we broke down as far as cost of living, we did do a video in Guadalajara that's not too old. So go to our channel, Mexico Relocation Guide, and I have some playlists. Look for the one in Jalisco, or you can do a search on our channel or in our website. Let me show you guys real quick how to search our website, because I think this is an underutilized feature of our website. So if you go to mexicorelocationguide.com, you can do a quick search here and you can type in Guadalajara. And anything that I've ever written about Guadalajara or any videos that we have done on Guadalajara will show up for the search results. So same goes for our free residency visa guide. If you go to free resources, there's a drop down. I have a lot of free resources, but if you're interested in that specific guide, then click on that. If you want to just go browse through our blog, I have a lot of different things that, a lot of different articles that will be really helpful for you. For example, what I mentioned earlier, how to apply for family members for their Mexican residency. I just posted something today about how to find out if your doctor in Mexico is licensed, because, there is no shortage of doctors in Mexico. We all know that, right? Again, I mentioned it earlier. Mexico is a huge medical tourism country, but not all doctors are licensed, and you need to know that, and you need to know how to find out if your doctor is licensed. So we put out these blog posts to help you as much as possible on your move to Mexico. And then, of course, if you're interested in taking it one step further, our complete Mexico relocation guide is huge at this, because not only do we have everything organized by category, but also we have a huge directory of contacts that will help you in your move to Mexico with either driving you and your pets, driving your belongings, international moving companies, private relocation tour guides, immigration facilitators, realtors, real estate lawyers, facilitators of all kinds who can help you get a driver's license, help you apply for your RFC, which is needed to then, work or start a business. People who will help you set up utilities, people who will help you with a variety of different things in Mexico. Our guide would be nothing without our recommended contacts. And it's a very specially curated list of people. I don't recommend just anybody. We don't get any kickbacks. We don't get any commissions from the people we recommend, because I want to be as neutral as possible on the people we recommend. And if they do ever offer us anything, I ask them to, pass on that discount to our customers. And a lot of them do, because we send a lot of business to them, but they're great. And this would be nothing without them. And it would also be nothing without people like you who watch this channel and have trusted us over the years. So I also want to thank you for spending your evening with us. I hope that you guys have gotten a couple of nuggets of information on this live stream. If you have, do me a favor, give it a like. And I hope that, you will continue to join us on live streams and learn more about moving to Mexico the right way. Because there's definitely a lot of mistakes that you can make, right? Moving to a new country is not easy. Moving to Mexico is not easy. It shouldn't be. I mean, it's a completely different culture. It's a different society. It's a different judicial system. There's different laws. It's a different language. Everything is different, right? So it's not going to be easy, but we try to make it as easy as possible for you, or at least try to give you as much of the important information that you might not even know that you needed to know. in our complete guide, as well as our free resources. I mean, we try to be as helpful as possible for anyone who is thinking of moving to Mexico. So thank you all so much for joining us today. I'm sorry if I didn't get to your question, but I hope that you will join me in a next live stream. If you're interested in getting these blog posts directly sent to your email or learning about anything that we share for our audience, please join the newsletter. It's mexicorelocationguide.com/newsletter. I added it to the comments at the very top. There you go, mexicorelocationguide.com/newsletter. Join it. I share a lot of really good and important information. Also some fun things, like, for example, we just shared the whole tradition on Dia de los Muertos and what each day observes, and some cultural things that'll help you understand Mexican culture. So thank you all so much for joining. I hope this has been helpful, and I will see you guys in another live stream. Nos vemos. Gracias.